Hello, British here, and you guessed it, old chap, it's time to pull up a scone with jam and cream and prepare your curious ears for the Academy of Imperfection, a conversational lecture series where experts in their field will share their wisdom on the subject of imperfection. Today, on this educational afternoon, we welcome famed paediatrician Dr. Billy Garvey.
You can't go, I want us to be perfect and I want us to never argue and I want it to always work. What's something that we can get some wins on the board for our kid, us as a family, our relationship, and that feels amazing. That's what we were talking about before. I put an effort into something and it felt good.
So park your penny farthings, increase your volume to a sensible level, and join students Hugh Van Kuylenberg, Ryan Shelton, and producer Josh Van Kuylenberg as they, on behalf of the Imperfects, sit down with Dr. Billy Garvey.
Well, these episodes are shaping up to be, I reckon, some of my favourites. We're in the Academy of Imperfection, and this is a good one. It's a huge call straight up, Hugh. Like it's big to say it's a good one before it's even started.
Well, there's a real story behind why we've got today's guest on, which I don't think we've really had that before. But so Missy Higgins entered the Vulnerability House a few weeks ago and told us that she was struggling with parenting.
And then you, last Vulnerability House, you then talked about your parenting.
Yeah, well, I sort of talked about how, well, Missy's story really resonated with me, and I felt a little bit inspired, I guess, by her vulnerability in that area. And so I spoke about it a lot and put that out to the world. And it came out on a Monday, and I sat there nervously just thinking, is this going to hit home with other people? Am I alone in this? And I was absolutely inundated with
all just saying stop whinging. No, definitely not.
All saying basically you're not alone. We're going through the same thing. It's really awful for us at the moment, and we're finding parenting is just too hard. And I chatting to Penny, in the 4.5 years of being parents, this is by far the toughest it's been. And just a lot of people saying similar. I had a few people email me saying, "Oh, we got adult kids now," but just listening to you speak brought back really strong memories of how hard it was when the kids are your age, and hang in there, and really nice stuff like that. So we were sort of chatting then about our next guest for the Academy of Imperfection, and I'm very lucky to know our guest today. He is a paediatrician. We thought a paediatrician would be a pretty good person to get on, just with the amount of people reaching out wanting to share that they're struggling as well. Yeah. The guest today is a guy called Dr. Billy Garvey. Billy is...
Doctor, not part of the Christian name though?
No.
Imagine calling your kid Dr. Billy Garvey. It's a lot of pressure.
That's a high expectation.
Sorry, yeah.
Billy is... So I met Billy. We met probably a bit more than a year ago, I think it was.
Yeah, I think so.
So the background to this is just... Professor Rob Moody, who is also my father-in-law, he is a mentor of yours, is that right?
Yeah, he's one of my many amazing mentors.
Yeah, so he kept saying to me, "You've got to meet Billy, you've got to meet Billy." And he said, "Why don't we all go down to your local cafe and we'll catch up for coffee, you can meet Billy there." And I had something on, so I turned up a little bit later, but Penny was...
You did?
I was actually the first one here today, which has never happened before.
That's true. I was late, actually, ironically, today, so sorry about that.
For the first time. But anyway, I turned up late and I got there. Rob was there, my father-in-law was there, Penny was there, the kids were there, and there was a guy sitting at the table. And I thought, oh, this is awkward. There's another guy's turned up. Where's the paediatrician I'm meant to be meeting today?
Oh, right, yeah.
I get that a lot.
Because Billy doesn't look like... When you think paediatrician, you don't think of what Billy looks like, I guess.
No, for some reason, and maybe this is just because I've got such a cartoon version of the world in my head, but it's like I imagine a paediatrician always has a white lab coat on.
Yeah.
And a stethoscope. But no, Billy, you don't look like what we imagine a paediatrician look like. You look like someone who's just walked out of the surf.
I wasn't sure what you were going to say then.
Yeah.
So
that's a compliment.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
Huge compliment.
I'll take that one.
So I've got to know Billy quite well in the last year or so. Billy is a paediatrician at the Centre for Community Child Health at the Royal Children's Hospital and Murdoch Children's Research Institute. Again, he doesn't look like someone who would have that title.
No.
I was actually doing a presentation the other day to an audience, and Billy had said, when we were catching up, I can't remember what it was, you'd said something to me, it really resonated with me, and I actually quoted you in one of my talks.
Okay.
And I said, Billy's great. If you want to see Billy, it's like I said, he's got a year-long waiting list. And this guy yelled out and goes, it's actually 2.5 years. Like really loud. So apparently it's 2.5 years to see you if you want to see you at the Royal Children's. So
just a little caveat, just in case there's someone in the audience, there is a long wait to see people at the Royal Children's Hospital. You kind of see very experienced people there. I'm one of them. I hope that's valuable, but there's a lot of us. And we're really keen to see people and we're really working on those waiting times. So that's just a little professional caveat.
Well, because I don't have kids, but who knows? Maybe in 2.5 years I will. So should I book now?
Yeah.
With the off
Just
chance,
make up a name.
Yeah, off chance that there is a kid there, and then I'll be straight in.
what are you going to call your child? What do you like your makeup name?
Dr. Billy Garvey.
I'll look out for it.
Oh, you'll see it.
Wouldn't be hard to me. So I'm so fascinated by the work that you do, Billy, because obviously because I'm a parent and obviously because I do a lot of work in the area of resilience. But yeah, I mean, there's a 2.5 year waiting list to see you. And one of the things you said to me, one of our catch-ups was you said it's so funny, there's such a long wait to see me. But what I tell parents so often, it's very simple, and I say the same thing a lot to parents.
Yeah.
And I find that really fascinating. And that's why one of the reasons I want to get you on the podcast, because people wait so long to see you, and I thought we could maybe pick your brain. Now, a lot of people who are not parents who are listening right now might go, no, I might go to the next episode, or...
Yeah, I might step out. No, I'm just hoping Billy will tell me definitively whether I should have children or not.
Yeah, well, there's also that, which I didn't want to put the pressure on Billy for that either, but I know that...
No pressure.
By the end of this podcast, we'd love for Ryan to know if he's going to have kids or not. But
what a hook.
The whole premise of this podcast is that what we see on the outside is really not what's going on inside all the time. You are the most classic example of this. Just to deviate a little bit from the topic of...
I think...
Mate, you're an orchid.
You are the most classic example of imperfect that we've ever had on the podcast.
So if you... I hope
Is he imperfect? Bring out the list.
We got a treat for you guys. A couple of friends of mine who are doctors absolutely excelled at school from a young age. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a surgeon. It was never in doubt. Ducks of the school, straight to university, straight into medicine. You had a very different path, and I want to touch on it now because I think this is what makes you such an incredibly good paediatrician, because your journey is so relatable and it's so human. So could you just quickly tell us about your journey, I suppose, from, I guess it's your imperfect journey to where you are now, which is such an incredible position.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think it's hard to tell that story without sounding like it's not really so much my story that's quite impressive. It's my parents' story. Like, my mum came from Ireland on her own as a teenager, 6-week boat journey, lands in St Kilda. She's pregnant. My older brother she was pregnant with, his dad, they went separate ways. And so she was in St Kilda as a late teenager bringing up a child back in, it was like 1970.
Oh, God, yep.
Yeah, a really amazing woman. And so then she brought up my older brother on her own, and then I think 12 years later had me and then my little brother. And then for the people not listening, I might talk about redheads a little bit, and that's because I am a redhead, in case anyone only listens to the audio and thinks I'm just got something against redheads.
Yep.
But my mum was, pretty fiery, classic fiery redheaded woman. And so she separated from my dad as well and ended up bringing up me and my two brothers. My mum was working heaps because she was really conscious of just having enough money, and we still really struggled with cash, but she was working for the local council and she did a lot in disability access and inclusion and all that stuff. She was really passionate about that. She was a waitress at the RSL, so multiple nights a week. So my mum was working heaps, and, I took advantage of that and played up a fair bit, which culminated in year 11 getting kicked out of high school. And
Whoa.
I got shown the door, and then not only did I get the boot, but brought my dad in and said, I need help. There's no way I've got the guts to tell my mum this has happened, because she was pretty strict. And my dad took me around all the local high schools And all of them went, yeah, we think we got a spot, we'll give you a call. And then they'd speak to my old high school and suddenly they didn't have a spot. And so last school we went to weren't sure what was going to happen next for me to finish VCE, because this was right term 3, year 11. This sat down with this amazing guy. He was just, meeting went the same way. He said, yeah, we got a spot. He said, so a couple of days we'll hear from you. He's like, no, we've got a spot. You come here next term. And that was the last option that I had for going to high school in my area. And I was just really lucky because I was, I kind of was a rat bag and I was playing up a fair bit. Yeah, just really that luck and that opportunity that was given to me was really amazing. And then I just was really lucky that I met people and went along and went to
What
uni.
happened at that school though? I love this part of the story, which sort of something that forced you towards the library.
Yeah, I started seeing this amazing person that was there, and the guy that was really popular at the school kind of was keen on her. I went to being the guy who every time I walked out of the classroom, I'd get kind of the classic American movie, books knocked out of my hands and pushed to the ground. And so I just went,
because you were dating the cool guy's crush.
Yeah, I was dating the cool guy's crush, and so I ended up going, well, I guess I'll just read in the library and during lunch. And
what a turnaround!
So no mates, but it was worth it because it meant that I got into uni, and then I really thought about teaching. I work with teachers pretty much every day in my work now. I think there's probably no more important job. Like everyone knows this, teachers spend 6 hours a day with our future generation. They do a really hard job, and a lot of them do it exceptionally well. And there's no way I could have done it. Like I was doing childcare, and I didn't have to teach them anything. I just needed to look after them, have fun with them, and that was hard enough.
Yep.
So I thought, and also schools, like we might get into this a little bit. Schools are now not just teaching kids; they're holding kids. They're looking after their mental health. They're supporting everything their family's going through. And they're really becoming our community hubs. And a lot of my mates that I worked with back then became teachers, but I kind of saw that was too hard for me. And I really thought about it though. But and I know, Hugh, that's the path you went down, which is really amazing.
No, well, I was saying it because I think it's incredible that you went, no, I'm going to be a paediatrician. But you've just said it was because it was an easier option. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, you would have seen this. Teaching's really hard. Like you've got, so many little kids.
Becoming a teacher probably isn't as hard as becoming a paediatrician, I would probably argue.
Yeah, maybe, but I reckon
Definitely.
Definitely. Yeah, I think doing the job though, I think being a teacher is way harder.
So this is an academy. You are like a lecturer. You do so much work presenting to people. I know this is not foreign to you, this kind of work where you're presenting all your knowledge. I want to start off in a particular area that really interests me, especially as a parent, and especially with what Penny and I are going through at home at the moment with our eldest. And I've heard you talk about dandelions and orchids before. Can you tell people about
Yeah,
that?
sure. Yeah, great. Yeah, so dandelions and orchids is something that I learned about a few years ago, but it's another paediatrician in America called Thomas Boyce, and he has come up with this theory through his research findings, and it's pretty amazing. The reason I think this concept is amazing is because I think it gives a lot of parents hope, and it gives a bit of clarity to what a lot of them are experiencing. And I've been really lucky to go through that journey with a lot of families and have found this resonates with a lot of them. Essentially what the dandelions and orchids says is that kind of 80% of kids are dandelions. And if you think about dandelions and orchids, and I know nothing about growing anything, including orchids, but dandelions grow pretty easily, crack in the concrete, bit of water, bit of sun, and they thrive.
Dandelions, just to clarify, are they the fluffy ones?
The fluffy ones.
Yeah, fluffy ones.
Yellow in the
That you
middle,
blow.
white petals.
And they just pop up everywhere.
Yeah, they're the ones with the yellow in the middle, the white petals. They're kind of all over the place, often on the nature strip.
Classic, if you drew a flower, you'd probably draw a dandelion.
Yeah,
okay.
they're the classic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
classic
you see them pop
flower.
up in they'll grow anywhere, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
And now
Dandelions,
we won't do that description of orchids because they're even harder to describe.
No, I think I know an orchid, actually. I know an orchid, yeah.
But orchids are really hard to grow. So
And
they're
this
really,
is 20% of kids are orchids.
Yeah, so 20% of kids are orchids. And the analogy is that orchids are really hard to grow. They've got to be perfect. If you move the pot, they crack it and say, I'm going to shrivel up a bit. Not enough sun, not perfect amount of water. They struggle. The reason that he uses that analogy is he found that most kids fit into that 80% dandelion category that, they go along and they're fine. They can have a hard time and not have a big impact to it. And, they don't get overtly struggle. They coast and they're okay. They get what they need and they do well. What his research found that was 20% of kids are orchids. And I think a lot of families who come and see us, because the main reason we get seen is my child is struggling emotionally or with behaviours. I'm not the type of paediatrician that sees kids that have a sore throat or things like that. And
Yeah, so I should have said that. You're very much focused on mental health, behavioural stuff.
yeah,
aren't you?
yeah, that's all the fun stuff. And it's a lot of the work as well is in that space. That's where the 20% of orchids come in. Those are the kids that are struggling. And they're the kids that parents, can see that they're having emotional difficulties but can't understand why the reaction is so big, why they're withdrawing. They're not even sure what happened. And they're really vulnerable to things in their environment, their relationships, things happening and it resulting in really difficult emotions or behaviours for them.
Just sorry to cut you off, but an orchid it's such a nice analogy because an orchid objectively is a more beautiful flower than a dandelion. Like a dandelion is common where an orchid is rare.
Yeah, totally. And I don't want to say 80% of kids are common.
I'll say 80% of kids are boring and you don't care about them. But there's 20% that are great. That's what you're saying, Billy, yeah?
Yeah, totally. Quote me through all your promotional material and and I'll look for some work in another field.
Yeah, I'm just getting a call from the Royal Children's Hospital.
But so you're actually right though. The bit that's, because I think a lot of parents relate to that bit and they go, yeah, my kid's an orchid. That's why I'm here. They're really struggling. I can't understand the reaction. The cool thing is that in a supportive environment that's nurturing and loving and responsive, those kids thrive. But they'll often struggle as they go through, and we can see them from when they're little bubs. So we work in clinics with little babies that are unsettled.
So this is the 80% or the 20% you're talking
The 20%,
about?
yeah.
Okay.
We can see the bubs that might be a little bit unsettled as they're coming up to a year of age. We then see kids in preschool age that struggle. School entry is another big time. And then we all, maybe I'm the only one, but we all went through a bit of a rough time during adolescence. And thinking about those kids as just being more sensitive and understanding that if we take advantage of that, they'll thrive is a really beautiful thing for a lot of families to understand. And it also takes away the blame. So a lot of families come and see us and they think I've done something wrong. It was something I did wrong. I was too sensitive. I wasn't sensitive enough. It was that time I left them in the supermarket when they were a little kid, or, I've been working too much. I've been doing this. It's my own mental health. And so much feeling of guilt comes into our clinics and blame and responsibility that it's nice to show parents that the kids who are sensitive actually are the ones that, will really respond to the environments that are nurturing and loving.
So Penny and I saw a specialist the other day with some stuff we're going through. One of the things that they said to me over the phone was, I chatted to the person first as a child psychologist. It's actually my cousin, James.
Okay.
It's a wonderful child psych. And I resisted seeing him because I thought maybe it's a bit unprofessional to talk to him. And I called him and I was in the car and he was at his school that he works at as a child psych. 5 minutes into the chat, he said to me, "Hey, you are doing such an incredible job. You should be so proud of how hard you're." And I lost it. I cried for 2 minutes. I couldn't talk. And I don't know if he knew I was crying because he was going, "You there, mate? You there?" I was like, "Yep." And I just couldn't get myself together. Is that something that you see a bit, like parents being so overwhelmed and then just being told that they're doing a good job has that bigger an impact on them? Is that consistent with your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the challenges that the families that where we see for certain, behavioural or emotional problems, those parents had a tough time when they were a kid and they went through a similar childhood. That's one of the bits that's really hard, I think, for a lot of parents is that when they're looking after their kids, they're seeing themselves in them and seeing this is what it was like for me. I really struggled as well. And now I've messed it up and now my child's going to have the same problems that I did. And that's an awful feeling to have. Parenting is so challenging. And I think that, there's kind of one world, which is people on Instagram and they're doing yoga with their baby and they're, doing everything perfectly. And then there's the rest of us that are just trying to keep our head above water. And so it's a phenomenal position to be in. I feel so lucky that I have families that come to me and they'll tell me stuff they won't tell anyone else about awful things they're worried about, they're experiencing, things they're doing they wish they weren't and having reactions they wish they weren't. And they come with a trust and an expectation that I'll be able to help and an openness, and it's this beautiful thing. And often the best thing I can do is to tell parents how good a job they're doing and how hard it is. And really sadly, a lot of parents will say that's the first time anyone said that to me, which must be heartbreaking.
I guess like who would say it? Like maybe like whose role is it other than the professionals that they go and say? Whose role is it to say that? I had a really good chat with someone last night. He said to me, you're doing a good job. Like to me, he told me, and I was like, oh, well, I just sort of realized that people don't really tell each other that very much, like because we're all so consumed with our own stuff. Yeah. From a parent's point of view, it's like, God, who takes time out to tell another parent that they're doing a good job? My fear with saying that would be that it would sound condescending, or it would sound like well, what I know, I don't know. Maybe you're not doing a good job. I don't know.
No, yeah, but I think you're right. I'm like, I think all of us need some sort of affirmation, and I think that we've all got a different skill set, but I think there is some evidence through child development that a sense of accomplishment of things you're making an effort with is really important, and often that comes off our peers.
Yeah.
A lot of the evidence around child mental health and adolescent mental health is having people in your world, not just your parents, who you can go and talk to, that support you, that will listen. I think we all need that as well. Like, it's not unique to kids and teenagers. We all need to have something that we're trying at, that we're getting some feedback that we're doing all right at it. And that will, for a lot of kids, that won't be school.
Because we probably do rely on, well, maybe projecting here, but you do rely on your parents to tell you that you're doing good, because that's who you've always looked up to want affirmation from. When your parents say you did a great job, that's a good feeling. But for me, I think it's also like, yeah, but of course you're going to say that. I feel like it sometimes means more, unfortunately, when someone who doesn't have to say that says it. Like, you don't unconditionally love me. My parents unconditionally love me. They're always going to think what I do is great to some extent. I'm lucky because my parents do think that. But having another person say, like a peer, what I do is like nothing compared to what parents do. Like, as far as like a job goes, being parents so much harder.
Yeah, I think so. But I think all of us think we've got to be really kind to people that we're engaging with, to understand they've got a different experience to us. And I don't know, like even is my story before, so much of it's luck. It's just luck that there was things that went a certain way, and I'm really lucky to be in a job that I love. But I've done heaps of different jobs with people that are, way more capable than I am, that are, really struggling with stuff. And I think that's been probably the most valuable thing for me, is not going through med school and doing training. It's been just to learn off so many people in the community. And I still get to do that. I don't work with just doctors. I work with educators, with other clinicians, with family services people, and they've just got this rich history of the hard bits, and which is engaging people, supporting them, respecting them. It's the hard bit is not figuring out how to diagnose anxiety. It's, having that relationship where you understand the timing, you're creating the space, the person feels comfortable talking to you about what they're really concerned about. And that's going to be different for every family, that even outside of parenting, that, it's really, without sounding too soppy, it's about relationships. And that's the amazing stuff about child development, which, maybe I'm living proof of, is your academic abilities is not what determines what happens in the future. How smart you are and how good your IQ is, how good you are at algebra and things like that. When you look at it, it looks like it's things like your social and emotional development and your skills. And we all know those people that are really good at relating to people and listening and all those things. And because that's what matters in life, is those relationships. It's not, who's used algebra again? Not that I don't want to make fun of anyone who teaches algebra. But
yeah, I just do a podcast called Always Algebra. But
well,
I have quite a fair bit.
It's so bad.
It's pretty boring.
Do you get many listeners? Or
no, but it's just something that I believe in pretty strongly. I just love X's and Y's. Sorry, Hugh, you go.
No, what I'd love to do, I don't know if this is possible, but I'd love to kind of, because I know with our listeners, there'll be listeners out there, kids who are 16, some are, like Josh, who's got a 1.5-year-old, all different ages. Is it possible to, just for a second, to say, what do parents most commonly come to you with in different age groups? Let's say, 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18. Is it possible to look at those three different age groups and say, here's what I'm most commonly seeing? Is that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah.
So like preschool, primary school and secondary school?
Yeah, I think we can think about it like that. Like what we're seeing across all age spectrums is that there is a real increase to our clinics, to our emergency departments, to all of the services that come around families. We're seeing a really big increase through the whole age spectrum in mental health presentations. And we used to think that's just teenagers. But
when you say mental health presentation.
Yeah, sorry, I should clarify that. So things like anxiety, things like self-harm, things like depression, negative thinking, emotional difficulties, behavioural problems as well in the younger age. The behaviour thing is interesting. Like I see a lot of kids and there are no bad kids. And it's a good example of like understanding that below the behaviours there's usually something that's going on that we're just trying to find what it is for that child and understanding what's normal, what's abnormal. And, it's interesting to think about it like that. But across that whole, the three spectrums you spoke about, we're seeing a really big increase in mental health or emotional and behavioural difficulties. And that's where a lot of the need is. And it's maybe more helpful to talk about it in that way than in separate ages.
Yeah, of course.
And is that, sorry, before, is there any possibility that is like a reflection on the fact that there's an increase in like anxiety and depression in adults and parents, and then that potentially, does that have an effect on the children as well?
Yeah, definitely. You're completely right, Ryan, because the whole context of the environment that we're in, like none of us sit in a vacuum or a bubble and we're just who we are. We're our families, our teachers, our peers, our broader community. And, that's really protective in some ways, but there's a vulnerability in it as well, in that when your community is having a hard time, like a lot of communities have been for the last 18 months, then there's this collective anxiety that happens. And so there is a vulnerability and strength in how much it's not just us as individuals that are like this. And we've really seen that kind of, and I'm talking about prior to COVID as well, there was a really big increase that was happening across our services to children. And I can't speak to adults, but my little bit of knowledge is that they've seen the same thing in adults and mental health. So, definitely.
Yeah.
With the increase of anxiety, is there one thing that you can put it down to, anything that you feel is quite common as a cause for this?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to have an answer that was kind of, it's just this one thing that seems to be happening. And the unfortunate thing is that the true answer is much more complex than that. And there's a lot of people, amazing researchers, that are looking exactly at those things. Why is this happening? What do we do about it? What are the influences? And it's, what are the protective factors? And I can definitely talk to, the evidence about those things. And I guess thinking about it through the age spectrums, as you were talking about, Hugh, like there's a common element in, what's going on with those kids. And it's kind of, when you think about it, whether it's the preschool child, I think was the youngest age that you talked about, or the adolescent, it's that, they're struggling. And sometimes we need to think as clinicians, like, what's the diagnosis? Like, is it anxiety? Is it ADHD? Is it this? A lot of the time it's getting to know that child and that family and understanding where they're coming from, what their experiences has been, and then trying to, think about it like that. And then what do we do about it and do it together? And
so like looking at certain points where you can alleviate pressure maybe on the family, is that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a number of different approaches that have good evidence for them. There's one example in kids that are struggling emotionally that we skill up parents in, and this is, I'm really lucky to be trained in a program called Tuning Into Teens. And that has an emotional coaching approach to kids that are struggling. And what it does is it skills parents up to respond. I don't think this is unique to parents. I think all of us can do this with our relationships. And it kind of has a number of steps that you go through as a parent. And the first one is recognizing the emotions in what's going on. So someone cuts you off in traffic, or one of your mates says something rude, or your partner's angry and does something, recognizing that's an emotion. And then, the next step is like seeing it as an opportunity. And 90% of the time it might not be an opportunity. Your kid's just come home from school and he's throwing the bag and told you to get stuff and gone to the room. But maybe it's an opportunity. And then trying to create an environment where you listen and you're not judgmental, you're just open. That's really hard to do, especially for someone you care about.
Even when I'm feeling like that now, it's like the last thing you want to do is talk about it, even though intellectually I know that's probably the best thing for me, but it's the last thing I want to do. And kids who have probably less emotional literacy than we do, how do they access that, I guess?
Yeah, and I think just creating an open space so that a child feels like when they are ready, they can come. And it's really interesting. Teenagers, one thing that happens in their like brain development is they often shift. That's why they don't usually fall asleep. Like everyone thinks, teenagers just love staying up late, but actually their brain's a bit wired like that. And it's often when they want to come and talk to parents, and parents are like, I can wind down and watch some TV or whatever, and then your child drops next to you and is like, I'm really struggling, and you're thinking, gosh, it's the end of the day.
How annoying.
You know, yeah, so it can be hard.
Not now.
And the good thing, one of the best things about this model is that when you look at it from an evidence perspective, it's not about doing it perfectly. And they say like 60, 70% of the time, if you can do this, it has a really positive impact on a child and adolescent's emotional development.
So when you say do this, it's like being open to the conversation.
Being like recognizing it, you know, seeing it as an opportunity, being open and non-judgmental. The other steps are, you know, you think about, you help the other person talk about it in language. That's, I can see that you're angry. You know, you seem to be really upset. That must be really frustrating. So it's non-judgmental, open language to help them with their own emotional literacy, which you were talking about. And then the last step, you don't always do, but it's help that person find a solution. And a lot of parents skip the first 4 steps and go to the 5th one. Kid comes in, you know, I just got kicked off the basketball team. And the parent goes, you don't even like basketball. Or, but you really want to play footy. And they're going straight to problem solving and just skipping all the bit, which is being in the moment with that child or adolescent who's just felt like it really sucks because I've just got kicked off the basketball team.
Which is just compassion, empathy. Is that
totally?
Yeah. So it's first of all, so do you actually say to them, I feel like, or do you ask them what emotions this you're feeling, or do you help them, do you say it, or do you say you must be feeling hurt or left out, or? Yeah,
like it must, you know, that must be hard, and I can see that you're angry, and, you know, and just being open, and it's not judged. The hardest bit is that often kids, especially teenagers, are in those moments are really sensitive to any criticism, or, you know, you're playing it down, or you're not listening to me, and they will. You can do it perfectly and they'll still fire up. But making sure they get in the habit of recognizing that you are open to them, you're not judgmental, you're going to listen, and if it's appropriate, you're going to help them find a solution. And that's a real challenge, and that's, you know, something we target towards teenagers. But the younger kids, it's just a more developmentally appropriate version of that. And what we need to understand with younger kids, and all of us really.
Sorry, what age when you say younger kids?
So like I'm talking about preschool, primary school. And all of us really, when we are in a really strong emotion, our logical thinking is gone. So expecting a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old or even sometimes a 25-year-old, when they're really emotional, to go, hang on a second, you're being a bit silly. Or think about it, this actually doesn't matter in the big picture. They're not choosing to not think about things like that. Or a 4-year-old that's, you know, going bananas, saying something to them is not going to unlock that doorway to them to it resolving, because they're completely overwhelmed by the emotion. And we understand this. Dan Siegel talks about this, you know, if people want to read more about it, but we understand that that primitive brain really floods everything, and they just become completely overwhelmed emotionally, and they can't access their reasoning. We see families trying to figure out what to do. What do I do in that moment? What do I say? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and nothing's working. And that's because most of the time nothing will work. Like, we can't put that expectation on ourselves. And I often think about it, you know, you'll sit there and meditate all morning, or you'll be like, I'm not going to crack it anymore. I've turned a new leaf and everything. And then someone cuts you off in traffic and you just lose it and you're gone. Because that it doesn't matter. You don't get that moment to be like, hang on a second, I had a plan for this. We've really got to understand that a lot of kids, we just pitch our expectation way too high of what we expect them to be able to do, when we can't do that most of the time. We can't feel the emotional surge coming and go, hang on a second, I'm not going to get upset about this. We run with it, and it's only down the track when everything's calmed down, we've got our like reasoning part of our brain back, and we can go, that was a bit silly, or I overreacted, or whatever. And I think that strategy helps parents, because it takes the pressure away from what do I do in that moment, you know, and that can be really challenging. A lot of parents talk about that is, you know, this is the bit that's really hard. And the Royal Children's Hospital surveyed parents last year, I think it was, and found that, you know, 1 in 4 of them said every single day, I'm stressed about my child's behaviour. That's a quarter, like every single day.
I'm maybe speaking out of school. I'm not a parent, and I imagine like one of the things that I think about if I had kids is how to balance what you want to do as an individual person who happens to also be a parent with a huge responsibility. Because like I feel like a lot of the stress might come from, I've decided, okay, tonight, like you said before, tonight I'm going to watch this show. Kid goes to bed. I've had a tough day. I want to have dinner, and then we're going to watch this show. It's going to be great. And then kid comes out, has a problem. And it's like, well, I want to help, but like, what about me?
But
like,
this show's right in the good bit.
Yeah,
And-
but like, I mean, that's a pretty straight example, but like, or whatever that might be, you know, it maybe gets in the way of what you had planned for your own life. And I know,
can answer that.
yeah.
You can't have expectations.
Yeah.
You cannot have expectations of anything, I've found. Like,
Yeah.
you can hope to do something,
Mm.
but the second you expect to do something, you just get disappointed. And maybe I'm just really
And never
venting.
vocalise that you want to do something.
And
Is that
I
a
wonder
jinx
though
straight
if
away?
you guys can comment on how important it is though to have some bits that are for you. And I think parents are classical at saying, nah, my role as a parent, my own mental health, my own needs don't matter anymore. And some of the hardest thing I do is convincing parents that actually, you know, they're an individual first, then they're in a relationship, then they're a parent. And they'll be a better parent if they have some access to who they are as an individual.
Well, funny you say that. We had a bit of a tough one the other night at home, the bedtime routine, and Rob Moody, my father-in-law, one of your mentors, was there, and he saw it all happen. And he was just helping us through the whole dinner and bedtime stuff. And usually he sort of leaves about then, but he was just waiting for us when we both got downstairs from putting both the kids down. He was waiting for us. And I just wanted to just go and listen to music somewhere or just be somewhere else. And Penny wanted to watch television. He said, no, have a seat. And he pretty much just sat us down and said, right, how are we going here? And just we just like a play-by-play, talked through what had just happened, everything that sort of went wrong, the stuff we did well. And then he said, and how are you two going? Like, how are you both going? As a couple, like individually, how are you? And how much time are you dedicating to looking after yourselves? Like how much of your own? And I said, it was like a counselling session. It was amazing. He's such a great man. I'm so lucky. But he said, what do you do that's good for you? I said, running. When I run, I just feel he said, how often are you doing it? And I said, it's probably once or twice a week at the moment. It's just, and he said, well, you just got to do it. Like, we'll all help. You've got to get out once a day, you've got to do this. And then we worked out for Penny what she needs to do. But you're right. You step back from it and go, I don't have time for this. I've got to do this. I've got to sort this out. This needs to get done. There's always something you can do around the house to make the kids' life easier. There's always something you can be doing. And the first thing you sacrifice is the thing that makes you feel good. Because I think as a parent, you feel like you're being a bit selfish.
Yeah.
That's certainly my experience. I don't know, Josh, if you...
Yeah, I think I'm yet to get the balance right. Like on Sunday, I was just so grumpy and I had no reason to be. But I was just in a
the
bad-
thing is you're allowed to be as well.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no, like we've all got to give ourselves a pass with that stuff.
Mm.
And yeah, I think, you know, Hugh's experience is a common one of like, you'll actually be benefiting your kids if you can find those things that refill you. And for a lot of people, it's exercise. For a lot of people, it's, you know, going for a swim or reading a book or, you know, finding that sense of who they were. And the same as in relationships. Like people often have kids together because they want to share that and they're in this beautiful relationship with someone, and often that goes missing a bit when a child comes along. Hugh, you've also got a gorgeous 4-year-old, and like we know that at 4 years of age is when a lot of emotional stuff peaks for kids, completely normal. And I'm stealing this joke off one of my colleagues, but he often talks about how if most 4-year-olds were adults, they'd all be in jail, just because of how they think the whole world revolves around them and they do whatever they want and they don't care the impact on anyone else. And I've
Just
loved
picture this
that.
jail full of 4-year-olds.
And it's interesting because that's completely normal because they're going through this ego stage where they have no empathy. It's completely normal for a 4-year-old in their brain, and I'm generalizing from 3 to 7 years of age, they go through a developmental stage where they don't understand the perspective of anyone else. And they've got these strong emotions and they don't go, I shouldn't really do this to Dad tonight. He looks really tired. They're just going, I want this, blah.
Yeah.
And that's all they're thinking about. And that's normal. And that can be really hard because you sit there and go, it's because of me.
That
Like
doesn't-
I've done something wrong.
That doesn't stretch to 39, does it?
No, I wish it did. I'd have a bit more time. But, no, I wish. But yeah.
I find it interesting what you were saying before with the 5 stages. Isn't it kind of ironic that the person, I find, maybe it's just for me, but sometimes the person that you want to do that kind of behaviour or when you need to be there for someone, the main people that you want to be there for, you can't seem to bring yourself to do that because the emotion of the situation takes over, as you were saying. And I feel like a lot of people, I find I can be really reasonable in work and with people who it doesn't matter as much to.
Yeah.
And then it's the people who you most want in the world to be the best for that you can't bring yourself to be the best for.
And the hard thing with that, Josh, is there's a lot of times where it's not the right time for the parent either because they don't have that emotional clarity and they're exhausted, they're really stressed, they're really angry that their child is doing this.
Yeah.
Because this was a really important thing to me or you knew I had this on or whatever, and that's the wrong time to be trying those strategies because it's going to fail. And we've got to really try as hard as we can to not set ourselves and our kids up for failure. And the biggest thing for that is we just aim too high. Like there's so many parents that their expectation is too much for their kids and then the kids just fail. And I see so many kids in clinic that are just failing over and over again. And to steal a story from a beautiful teacher that I work with, she said, you've got to go to where the child is. And she said that she's got, she was talking about a little boy and saying she praises him for how good he is at walking through doors. And he feels good about himself. He walks through doors and his head is higher, his shoulders are up.
Is this someone who is at the school refuser or someone
This
who...
is just a kid who's struggling, early primary school, little boy, having a hard time. And she praises him for how good he is at walking through doors because that's where he's at. And he's going to get to the point where he's with the other kids and he's doing the same stuff. And maybe it'll be 20 steps where it was 1 step for every other kid. But he's feeling good about himself because someone's praising him, someone's calling him out and saying, mate, you're doing really well at that. And there's lots of kids out there that aren't getting that. And just understanding that, I think, and going, I'm going to go to where you're at and we'll get to where you need to be.
So that's, I find that really interesting, the praise thing. Like, is praise, generally speaking, a healthy thing for kids, like when they're developing? My just instinct would say, like, well, you don't want to give them too much praise because they'll come to rely on it and only do things for praise. Am I wrong?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I can talk from an experience. And
Sorry, Josh. I don't usually do the good questions, so I just thought I'd throw one in.
I'm out.
No, it's a really good question, and I think that there is definitely a concern of that I'm going to overpraise them and they'll get lazy. But I think what's important to recognise in kids is that, especially if they're struggling, we're talking about their behaviours, not them. So we're not saying, Ryan, you're terrible, you're lazy or whatever. You're talking about the behaviours they're doing, and praising their behaviours is really important, especially with younger kids. So what happens with a lot of parents who are really busy, they're flat out and they're trying to do their laundry, they're trying to get dinner ready and stuff, and their children are going crazy and they're thinking this, they'll come and say, because we'll often ask what's the hardest time of the day, and often they'll say dinner time, bedtime, getting ready for school or whatever.
Yep.
And what often happens is that in those moments, parents are really occupied. When parents are, everything's relaxed, the kids are often playing well together, they're sharing, they're drawing, whatever, and they're fine. And the parents move away and they go, cool, I'm going to get dinner ready, I'm going to do the laundry, I'm going to do that stuff. And so there's no reinforcement of that. That's just happening. And what there's reinforcement of is I threw the bag, I swore at my sister, I punched my brother. And then the parents come in and go, Billy, what are you doing? I told you not to do that. And kids a lot of kids, especially the younger kids, don't think I shouldn't have done that because dad's angry. They think I'm getting attention. And they care more about engagement with their parents than they do about what type of engagement it is. And that doesn't mean just ignore them when they're fighting or doing things you don't want them to. That just means that go to them and support them and reinforce all the stuff they're doing. And I see heaps of kids where, there's parents will come in and say they just don't listen and don't do anything. And without sounding too cheesy, I think we really become who we hear we are. A lot of the kids that we see in clinic have waited for years and they've been told in primary school they can't come to school anymore because they misbehave too much and all this stuff. And they come in and sit down and hear their story, which is all negatives, and their parents are trying to get help, so they have to tell that story. And it just, they don't, I'd be standing up going, that's not true. And then you just try and change the narrative a bit. And the amount of times that kid will, and it's nothing amazing I'm doing, but that kid will change over the time I'm involved with them. Sometimes that first time, a good example, a kid the other day, and he just halfway through, we were getting ready to finish, and I was signaling that in the conversation, and he just started packing up the toys. And Mum's like, I've never seen him pack up toys in my life. But he just heard a couple of positive things, and he's like, man, this guy, thinks I'm all right. And so instead of pulling the curtains out of their rungs and drawing over the walls, he's just started doing something different,
Amazing.
And yeah, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I really believe that the narrative that all of us, but especially kids, have around us has a big influence on.
I like that. I mean, that distinction that you made between praising the person or praising the behavior, that's what you were talking about? Yeah. I mean, that's like that makes a lot of sense to me, that distinction, because the temptation would be like, you're such a good boy for doing that. And so it feels like, okay, well, as long as I keep doing good things, I'm good. And then if I stuff up, and then the anxiety probably comes about because now I'm bad if I make a mistake or fail in some way.
Yeah, we put a lot of pressure on especially bright kids in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing. What we probably need to do a bit more of is praising effort instead of you got 100 on the test, you're a champion.
Yeah.
You tried really hard for that, you're a champion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a subtle distinction because you're showing them that the effort and trying is what the important bit is.
Mm-hmm.
And, that there is definitely, kids that struggle because they think that's the expectation is that I'm really smart, so I should always succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, the key of resilience is failing and getting back up from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the effort bit, is not so much I'm always awesome at this. It's I try really hard at this,
Yeah.
Ben Crow, who we've had on the podcast, I don't know if you know Ben, I've discussed this with him before, and he said one of the places to see it play out is now with his kids. I mean, they're all grown up a bit now, but seeing them play kids sport, he said the message to kids needs to be, it's simple. He said, I love watching you play.
Yeah, cool.
It's not, you didn't have your best game today, we could probably work on that, or geez, you're amazing today. It's just, I just love watching you play.
Mm.
And I've taken that to so many elements of my parenting. We were running, Benji and I were running around the AS track the other day, and we were doing races and stuff. And I was trying to work out what percentage of races should I win that's good for him or what. Oh. And then because I didn't want him to win everything, but then I also wanted him to enjoy it and feel like he's good at it. And I was doing this equations in my head of going, what percent is that? And then I thought of and afterwards he was asking about who won, and I said, I just love watching you run. I love watching you run. And it just felt like it felt like I was saying the right thing. I was like, oh, this really feels like I'm delivering a good message here.
What did he say? But who won?
I put it up I put that video on Instagram. It was very funny. It was the one where we were running in the rain and we were running towards the lanes, and the lane numbers there, it's like one through to one lane 1 to lane 8, and he saw lane 4 and he goes, I'll run in lane 4 because I'm 4. And then he looked really confused and he goes, where's lane 41? Where are you? So good.
It's a significant disadvantage
on
the track when you're a kilometre out from the centre. But I think it is and it's the best thing. I cannot believe I get paid to do what I do, and I have a big imposter syndrome of I get to see these kids and I love seeing them and being a small part of their journey. And I think they pick that up. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to connect. As I said, the hard bit is not what to do. Do we start a medication? Do I write a letter that says you got this diagnosis? It's trying to connect. And there's so many great, I often get asked about screen time and video games and all this kind of stuff and phones and the impact that has on kids. But I remember coming home a few years ago now to my partner, and it was when Fortnite was really taking off, and every kid in clinic was coming and talking about Fortnite, because you often say, when you hear all the bad stuff, you're like, what do you like? What are you good at? And Fortnite kept going. And kids are so good at knowing if you're being honest or not. And the kids started to realise that I've never played Fortnite, but I was pretending I had. I was like, yeah, I'm really awesome at Fortnite. You know, what level are you up to? And like, this guy, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. So I came home to my partner. I was like, I got to start playing Fortnite. And I got so into Fortnite that we'd be like at work and there'd be like academic journals we'd be discussing about video games and stuff. And I would chip in about Fortnite, and I became the Fortnite guy at work because I was like, all these academics are sitting around and I'd chip in and be like, well, actually, Fortnite and talk about Fortnite. But it gave me so much currency with the kids because they realised I was being genuine and talking about it. And
But that's fascinating. I mean, that makes so much sense. But that's fascinating because I feel like the sort of parent I feel like I would want to be. Who knows what would happen because who knows? But would be one that instead of rolling my eyes at what I think is like a lame new thing that they're doing and that I think is damaging, I'd be like, I'd want to be the one who's like, can I play?
yeah,
Like to get on their level, which is a sort of what because then you're an ally, I guess, as opposed to but then it's, and you don't want to be like, all right, well, stop playing now. You've played too much if you're the one who loves playing as well, because I think I would genuinely love playing Fortnite. I don't think I'd be good at it, but I think I would love to try. But yeah, I mean, is it sort of about that? It's
definitely, Ryan. And I think you would be good at that. So which
Fortnite.
Well, being a parent, but if you took the Fortnite bit, that's fine.
I should try it. So you addicted to Fortnite now? Is that-
No, I wasn't that good at it. There's a lot of kids that are really good at it, and I'm really competitive. So I kept losing.
And you know it's all about winning.
It is all about winning. That's the actual message. Quote me at the end. Billy came on. It's all about winning.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, totally. Mums are so bad at that. Mums often think that's dad's job. Dad's job is to have fun with the kids. My job is homework, cleaning, making dinner. And I'm stereotyping, but the amount of times where like I'll say to parents, what do you guys do together that's fun? And a lot of parents can't answer that question specifically because their kid is really struggling. Whether they're a teenager or a little kid in preschool, their kid's really struggling and they're just trying to keep their head above water. And they don't see that as a solution. They see, no, we've got to stop him doing this. And they've kind of they've forgotten about the bit, which is just celebrating and having fun with their kids. And honestly, sometimes some parents hate it when I start talking about video games. And and the kid's like grinning and going, this is awesome. He's, saying it's okay to play video games. And the mum's thinking, I can't believe I waited this long to see someone who's saying video games are okay.
Who's actually playing Fortnite against my son right now.
During a session.
And yeah, understanding that's really important. Like, and parents doing that stuff together and going to where the kid is, what's he into and, what's she into. And that's really important. So I think you'd be great at that, sitting down and playing video games with your kids.
But what about if you haven't done that? Like if you've spent like 6-7 years and you haven't been doing that, I can just tell a kid would think it was so inauthentic if all of a sudden the parent who's never done that goes like, walks in with a backwards hat and hoodie on and goes, hey, bruv, can I play some Fortnite with you, man? Like, how do you do that without seeming like fraud?
The great thing about parenting is you're never going to come across as cool, in touch or anything like that. It's one of the golden rules of it. But I think so the actual evidence of parenting, like if you look at all of it, and this is heaps of studies and stuff, one of the strongest things that comes through is what's called reflective practice. All reflective practice means is we as a family, me as a parent, me and my child are trying to get better at X. Mm-hmm. Bedtimes, connecting more, not having so many fights or whatever. This is our strategy where all of us who are involved are talking about, we're all doing it together. We're not targeting him. Mm-hmm. We're not isolating out her. We're all trying to get better at this thing. And you reflect back on it and go, how's it going? How are we going with that? And if you're trying to connect more, you go, cool, I'm going to try and sit down and walk in with my hat on backwards and I'll, throw some words out and sit down and play. And 2 weeks later you go, that's not working. And you change it up and try something different. And it's not that there's one perfect thing to do, whether it's talking about little babies or teenagers that are struggling. It's trying to figure out what you're trying to work on, getting rid of 99% of the things and picking one or two of them, deciding how you're going to do it in a positive way together as a family, and then trying it and looking back and going, how are we going? That's reflective practice. There's not these golden ways to do it. It's helicopter parenting, it's bulldoze parent, whatever. Everything is different in the context of the child and the family and the community they exist within. But reflective practice is a really powerful thing. It's just really hard to do because we get caught up in the day, the weeks, and all those things, and we don't have time to look back and go, we're trying to get better at this stuff. One of the best things about that approach is 99% of things you ignore. You just go, that's, wearing or whatever, that's not what we're worried about at the moment. We're trying to get us all sleeping better or whatever it is. We're doing it together. We're not signaling out the one that's driving us crazy.
This is going to sound weird. I feel like you've just described elite sport, the experience of elite sport.
I was thinking the same thing, yeah.
Like with the football clubs I work with, Port Adelaide at the moment, it's like play on the weekend and then they'll sit down and there'll be 4 or 5 different people who will actually code the game, as in they'll actually get footage of the game, send it back to the coach. They'll all watch it again on the Monday morning, the coaches. They'll pick out the parts, say, and go, this bit here we've got to get better at. And then they practice all week getting better at it. Then they play on the weekend, they have a discussion about it. It's all like reflective practice. Whenever I see them in action doing that, whenever I see, I remember once being on a flight on the way back from a game and I was sitting next to the guy who was like coding the game, going through and looking for certain parts. And I remember thinking, my gosh, imagine if we all applied that to our lives as human beings. Like, pick a little spot. Like for me, like going to bed right now, I'm finding that really hard. Like, because it gets to 10 o'clock at night and I think I should go to bed now, but I've actually got some peace and quiet for the first time of the day and there's an NBA game on. I'm just going to watch it and I'll be really tired tomorrow. It's midnight. Like I feel like if I did reflective practice, if I had strategies and I went, no, I'm going to watch it tomorrow during the day, I can still watch it then, and then reflect on it and go, how did I go? I feel like our lives would be, I think it's a lesson for all of us in life.
Yeah, the thing is we can't make perfect the goal because we'll all just feel crummy about ourselves. Maybe you can when you're a footy team, but when you're a person, you can't beat yourself up because you watch the NBA game, but you can just go, I'm trying to get my sleep better, and just trying it for a couple of weeks of, maybe not watching that or not having your phone in the bedroom or winding down an hour before or whatever the sleep hygiene approach that you're taking, and then just going, what's it like? And instead of making a massive change to your family or you as an individual and go, from now on, we're getting rid of iPads or we're all going to sit around the dinner table and we're never going to sit on the couch and watch TV or, whatever it is, you're not changing it forever. You just having a shot, giving it a test and seeing what's it like if we do that as a family. And you can get to the end of it and go, that actually sucked. It was much better watching TV for dinner. And that's fine. But if that's the thing that you want to aim for, it's that. And the biggest reason those things fail with the families I work with is it was too big a stretch. So, it was too hard for the family or the child, or there just wasn't enough consistency. And those are completely understandable reasons they fail. But that's why you can't go, I want us to be perfect and I want us to never argue and I want it to always work. What's something that we can get some wins on the board for our kid, us as a family, our relationship, and that feels amazing because that's what we were talking about before. I put an effort into something and it felt good.
So it's like agility. So it's like, is it like being agile, being adaptable? So it's like a footy team. If they're playing really well and then the other teams figure out what they're doing and they're like, oh, it's not working anymore, we need to change our game plan. I guess, is it sort of...
Totally. And I guess just what is your gauge if it's not working? And, everyone is different for that. But we know a lot of kids, are really struggling. Some kids are really good at showing us they're struggling. They have really obvious behavioural problems, but there's a whole group of kids that really withdraw. Mm-hmm. And I think the agility you're talking about is really important. And that's why I do a lot of work outside of the clinic room in trying to help people have, a good understanding of what to look out for, what to do about it, what's okay. How do we support kids so that they thrive, especially in their development and well-being? And being agile and going, I've noticed that they've stopped going to netball, or they spend a lot of time in their room, or they haven't been talking about that friend anymore. And that's probably the agility, is going, I just probably need to check in on them.
Well, like you said, that's the opportunity maybe, to see the opportunity in it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And those needs change. Kids go through different times in their life where they will need different levels of support, different approaches to it. And, parents are really intuitive about, what they need. And I think we're not very good as a society at talking about how hard this stuff is. We're very good at talking about it's amazing. Oh my God, having kids is the best thing that's ever happened. And, I'll put on Instagram how we do a workout together in the same coloured outfit or, ridiculous stuff.
Do people do that, do they?
I think so. And
yes, they do. They do.
and that's really hard.
Yeah.
And we're not, I guess we used to have a community that was a lot more close, like just in terms of in person. And it was much easier to say, hey, I'm finding this really hard. No one told me this bit. Like I've got a 9-week-old and I've been working.
Congratulations, by the way. I should have said that from the top.
Thank you. No, she's
9 weeks.
9 weeks. 9 weeks. She's gorgeous, and she's just to reference red hair again. She's got. I was like gunning for a little girl with red hair, and I was also gunning that she'd be healthy and all of those things.
Yeah.
But we didn't know, and when we met her, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But
well, if you need any help, just let me know.
Thank you.
Need any advice or anything?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, that's the funny thing is that I've worked with families, especially like ones with newborns, for a long time now, and I didn't realise how hard it was. And I've listened to how hard it is and thought like I've been really empathetic as well. But it's really hard. And that doesn't mean she's not gorgeous and I don't love her and all of that stuff, but it's really hard. And I have such a privileged position that I come from. Because when she's been crying for 2 hours, I know she's okay and it's still really hard. And the most of the parents out there are going to be like, something's wrong. I'm doing something wrong. She's hurt. She's sick. All of those things.
Yeah.
And so I still don't have the true experience of what it's like for a parent who isn't a paediatrician. And it's amazing. And it's really funny that the 2 big things that I've already stuffed up, the first one was within an hour of when she was born. So we'd picked a name and we'd both, Annalise, my partner, had picked it long before she even knew she was pregnant, that it was going to be a vet. She really loves a vet. When she's born, I'm like holding her and Annalise is, still to come into the room and the midwife is just like, oh, what's the name? And I'm like, oh, it's a vet. But we'd never written it out. And so she just goes, oh, like this, and spells it with an E. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I texted probably 40 people and was like, a vet's been born, she's this weight, she's this everything. Annalise comes into the room. First thing she looks over at the card is like, that's not how you spell it. I was like, I've literally, the only role that I had in this child's life was to get the name right, and I stuffed it up. Yeah. And so that was a classic one. And then the other one was that the second night home from hospital, and, without sounding full of myself, and I will anyway, I work in a clinic that looks after unsettled babies. I helped update like the clinical practice guidelines that we do. I'm published author in unsettled babies.
Yeah.
Second night we're home. She's been fed. She's been changed. Annalise is obviously exhausted. I'm like, you know what? I've got this.
Yeah.
You go to bed.
I'm Dr. Billy Garvey.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Billy Garvey. I am the guru. I've got this. And I reckon
I
after
do not
about
make mistakes.
and my partner's amazing, but she had a smirk on her face when 2.5 hours later she comes out of the bedroom because Yvette still hasn't stopped crying and is still unsettled and takes her off me and settles her in an instant. And
The world expert.
So that's a really important message, is that it's easy to know the textbook stuff and it's easy to go, oh, this stuff is easy. It's easy to support kids with anxiety or kids that are struggling.
I don't know if I don't know if Annalise told you this, but I bumped into her the other day outside a cafe and she was with a vet and I just met a vet and I said, oh, what are you up to today? And she said to me, oh, we're just going to go and see a vet. And I went, right. Yeah, like there she is. There she is. She goes, yeah, we're about to head off to a vet now. And I went, yeah, that's a vet. Yes. And she goes, yeah. And she was like looking at me. I was both just going, what the fuck is going on? And I realised later she was actually, because she had your dog with her, she was going to see the vet.
To see the vet.
Yeah, she's taking a vet to see a vet. It was very confusing.
That must have been nice and confusing. No, but it's been a real eye-opener for me. Like, and I'm 9 weeks in, but it's it's amazing. It's been a beautiful thing, but a really hard thing. And I think we're not good at saying that. And it's amazing when you're having a bit of a tough time, the amount of people that will come out and say, yeah, we really struggled with it as well. It was really hard. Because everyone's like, this is amazing.
Yourself,
and we've got to get better at that. We've got to get better at saying how hard all of this is. And it doesn't mean you love the kids less. It doesn't mean you're enjoying it less or anything like that. It just means it's hard. And that's the bit that I'm learning very quickly.
I think I've not on purpose, but I think I've sort of shifted towards saying, when people say, what's it like having kids? I reckon when it was Benji for the first year, maybe year and a half, I'd say it's the best thing I've ever done, best thing that's ever happened to me. And now I've realised I'm saying Yeah, it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It is the hardest thing I've ever been through. And that's not something it's just a natural shift that's taken place, I think.
Yeah.
You mentioned just before iPads, and I think the general public are just sick of me screen shaming everyone.
Yeah.
Could you give us your spiel on social media and devices?
Totally. And I think I've told you this story when we were having a coffee, but a few years ago I was speaking at a parenting conference thing, and I was about halfway through and I was talking about just enriching kids' development and stuff. And I had like a slide that had screen time on the top of it. And I swear to God, in the middle of the audience, the moment I clicked on that slide and didn't have any text yet, this dad just stands up in the middle and just goes, "We are so sick of being screen shamed." And the whole audience just like got behind him. We're like, "Yeah, we are." And thankfully, I wasn't about to go into like how bad screens are. But I think that's a real thing that parents feel.
He's talking. I feel like I must have spoken at that school maybe the week before that.
Yeah, it's really hard. And if you look at it, we are seeing, we're seeing such a big increase in how much time kids and all of us spend on screens. We also have to understand kids are watching us. So we are role modeling not just how we talk, but how we behave. And they're seeing us completely captivated with these phones that make sounds. And even little kids before they're speaking get captivated by phones because they see how much we're doing it. And I think, there used to be guidelines in every country. They would say, this is how many hours. So, Australia still has a guideline. I think it says, below 2 years of age, child should never look at a screen. 2 to 5 years of age, they can have an hour, and over 5, 2 hours max. And when you ask parents about it in surveys, 80% of them say, I don't meet those requirements. I use it more than that. And I think the other 20% are lying and just saying that, I stick to that because it's impossible. What's important, I think, is to understand two parts of it. One is that kids spending a lot of times on screens, it's not so much that it's a negative thing, it's that there's richer things they can be doing that they're not doing. For example, if your child is spending 3-4 hours a day on a screen, that's less time that they have to learn all the social communication skills of engaging with a peer, taking turns, understanding their facial expressions, understanding how when someone gets upset, how do you respond and all those things. The other thing is there's different parts of screen time, and instead of just time, I think the content is more important and what kids are doing. And younger kids, you've got to be really careful about the content they're seeing. Older kids and adults, what it seems to be is you can break it down into active and passive use, and this has nothing to do with parenting. When you look at the research, the active use seems to be a positive thing. What they look at, how they define active use is you're being creative on it. So you're putting content up that you've created, that you're proud of, that you've invested in. You're active in your engagement, using it to talk to other people, engage with your network, meet new peers, whatever. The passive content is the stuff that seems to be more associated with negative outcomes around mental health and sleep and all of those things. And that's kind of just scrolling, passively looking at stuff, especially when it's open-ended and you're just not really engaging with it. And kids and adults that are struggling with their mental health are more likely to have a lot more passive use. And that can be where it becomes really worrying because they're engaging in that. Obviously, there's also things like bullying and things like that we see. But to simply state screens are all bad and we shouldn't be using screens is a complete waste of time because they're not going to leave our world. And secondly, it's not helpful because parents go, I've heard that 1,000 times. You tell me how I get them in the car, how I do this, how I settle them down, how I see some kids that aren't connected socially because their parents have been really strict with saying you're not going to be on social media, and they're in high school and they're going, I don't get invited to anything because I'm not allowed to have an account. And so it's a really delicate balance, but I think that understanding that can be helpful and just thinking, I should just be careful about what my kids are doing on screens and think about, the active use can be really helpful for their social relationships, their creativity, their sense of self, their self-esteem. All that stuff can be built by that.
And has it been is there any research really on the true impact of like screens? Because, well, social media's only been around for like 15 years really. Like, is there any because I just wonder what it will be like in what a kid who's born now, like that gets a lot of screen time and has sort of the worst case scenario of that. Do we really know yet what the true impact is when they're say like 30? Like, do we know how that's?
Yeah, I think the kids that are having a lot of excessive use, it can be a bit of a barometer that they might be struggling a bit, and to think it's a good kind of trigger to say, I need to think more broadly about how my child's going because I've noticed they're spending all this time. But it doesn't necessarily equate to something negative because your child's using a screen. We've also got to remember it's been a huge cultural change, you know. So we've, as I spoken about earlier, mental health is getting worse in our communities. More people are coming to services. Some people go, well, that's because of screens, which is a bit ridiculous because it's much more complex than that. And there is no community that has all the same stuff we do without screens that we can go see those guys are doing better.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think what parents should just be thinking about is how is my child going? And just like emotional difficulties or behavioural problems might come out, sometimes excessive use of those screens, especially a change, so they didn't used to, but now they use it heaps, can be a bit of just a red flag and going, you know, maybe my child needs a bit more help or I need to come in a bit more or look at it as an opportunity.
I feel like that 2-year wait you've got at the moment is
about to explode.
No, well, that, but I also feel like it's because kids are booking in to see you. Like, we get to play Fortnite, we get back on social media. Mum, we should definitely see this guy.
Yeah, that's my colleagues might be like, what is he actually doing in here? But no, not all of our clinics have that, but some of them do. And there's places in Australia where there is no wait list because books are closed. So you can't actually go and see someone. So it's not a 2-year wait. It's there is no list. There is no wait list because they're not taking anyone. And that's even scarier. Yeah.
I'm wary of the time. I know you've got to go and speak at a school now. In fact, you have to leave you have to leave right now. So
okay.
No, sorry, you don't have to. You're very welcome to keep but I know you said you had a hard out at 3:30. I really appreciate your time today, and I feel like there's a whole lot of parents listening right now going, no, don't stop. I've got more.
Yeah.
I've got questions. So sorry to those people. But
no, it's fine. We're trying to do a bit more in the future. Like, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone who'd like to in the future. And
just be careful what you offer.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to make that possible, but it's very kind of you at your time today, and good luck to you as a new dad.
Thanks, guys.
And I think your child has hit the parenting jackpot.
No, so maybe because of my partner, but not because of me. I'm still getting the hang of it. But it's been amazing to talk to the three of you. So thanks a lot for your time. I think it's amazing what the three of you are doing.
Thanks, Billy.
Ditto. Thanks, Billy.
And that's it for today. On behalf of Hugh, Ryan and Josh, and of course the splendidly marvellous Dr. Billy Garvey, thank you for your attendance at the Academy of Imperfection. I hope you have a wonderful day. Me? Well, I've promised myself a pot of tea and some Marmite while I polish off the final chapters of Pride and Prejudice. Again. Cheerio!